Hi everyone. Sorry about the sorry about the technical difficulties. Hopefully you can see that I just wrote hi on my screen.
Yes, we are good.
Okay, good to go. Awesome. Yeah, actually I did. It's funny, my journey into digital art began with Corel. I don't want to say ended because it's not ending yet, but definitely began with Corel way back in the day. I worked in the sign industry as a graphic designer, making like the signs that you see on restaurants and billboards, on menus inside restaurants, everything like that. And the standard in that industry was Corel Draw because that's what all the machines used. And so I learned graphic design and digital work with all the Corel products, with Corel Draw, with Corel Photo Paint and everything. But my fine art, I still created traditionally. And I remember just one day I sort of had this idea of, you know what, I could kind of collage together some of my reference in Corel and use that as, working digitally was so much easier than sort of, scratching on layers after layers after paper. I used to work traditionally the same way I sort of do digitally, in that I would create a piece with layers of vellum, and I would maybe design a figure, and then I would design her costume on another layer of vellum over top of that. So I was always sort of thinking in the way that digital works, but I hadn't really fully integrated all of it together. Um, Anyway, so then I moved into Corel Painter when I was working traditionally. I was mostly an oil painter, and oil paints are messy and expensive, and after a while, the chemicals sort of can start to make you sick. So while at that point I was integrating digital with my traditional work, I hadn't fully made the journey into it. So I think it was about 2006 when I really started. Oh, so I guess 10 years ago when I really started exploring painting digitally and got my first Wacom Cintiq and all of that good stuff. And actually, it was pretty great because I didn't pursue in my art career. I kind of looked at the options that were out there, and you can sort of go the gallery route, or you can go where you're just, painting your art and putting it in galleries and hoping that you can sell it for thousands of dollars to support yourself. Or you, especially if you do genre art like fantasy or sci-fi work, if you paint fairies or elves or kings and queens, it seems like the traditional career route for that is to become a commission artist, where maybe you work for a company or gaming, or you do book covers or magazine illustrations and things like that. And I've never been good at realizing other people's visions. I've never felt that it was really my path to paint what an art director wanted me to paint, which might sound strange to say because a big part of how I make my living right now is through art licensing, and so in a way I am painting what other people ask me to paint, except that with art licensing there's a lot more freedom. Manufacturers are far less picky about what you're creating for them than, say, a magazine would be about an illustration that needs to go with a story, because it needs to reflect the story. So in my case, when I work with manufacturers for licensing, they tend to look at my body of work, and then if they decide they want to go with me, they'll give me pretty broad parameters. They'll say things like, wolves are selling really well for us right now with Game of Thrones, and everybody likes ravens and wolves, and they like Celtic things, and this is the sort of colorway that's selling for us now. We want a lot of turquoises and blues and purples, and they'll say, so just give us something Celtic with wolves with turquoises and blues and stuff. And that's how I'll end up with creating the work I make. So for instance, actually, here's a good example. I'm going to open up, and this I think is one of the pictures we've used for this webinar. I used on my page. So this was an example of a licensor saying the Celtic stuff's selling really well for us, and so do dragonflies, and so could you create something for us in these particular colors with dragonflies and Celtic? And so that was pretty broad parameters for me, and that was fun, so I created this piece. And then from there, though, one thing when you're working with licensing is you have to consider I always say you want to work smarter, not harder. So you need to consider that if you're painting this one piece, you want it to be compatible with as many different products as it can be. So you're painting one piece and you're getting a lot of value from it, a lot of versatility. And especially painting digitally, that allows for so much freedom because, of course, you can create in layers. And so for this piece, for instance, I've got the knotwork. I'm turning off layers here so you can see. You can see that I have the knotwork on its own layer here. So that this was compatible for a lot of different products, and we could crop it easily for a lot of different sizes. So let's see. So you see here we have it on a clock face. And this has been t-shirts and stickers and mugs and clocks and all sorts of things. And one thing that helps me to create that way that I came up with a while ago, this is going to look really intimidating, but I promise it's not, is this template that I made for myself, which covers sort of all the different sizes that I might work with my manufacturers. So, for instance, okay, and one thing some people may not realize is that you can work in Photoshop files in Corel, and that's pretty awesome because that way you're not having to save it as a RIF file and then convert it to Photoshop if you need to go into Photoshop for something specific. So I have this template as a PSD template, and hopefully you can see over here on my layers palette the different things that I have here. So, for instance, anytime I'm creating, I have, I start with like 10 by 10. That just seems to work well for me. 10 by 10 at 300 DPI. This circle thirds you see here is for when I'm creating Celtic knotwork. I tend to work in multiples of 3 for that. This layer here is a 10 by 10 circle. We've got an 8 by 10 horizontal, an 8 by 10 vertical, and I'll turn some of these off so you can see. Then I have an oval crop, and then this one's very particular to me because I work, I also create cards and postcards and oracle and tarot decks. I have a specific crop here for my tarot cards, so anything I'm working on should fit within those crop marks. And so, for instance, let's see.
Brigid.
Yes.
Do you ever create phone covers? Because just looking at that and knowing the size of the cards, it probably lend itself well to phone covers.
Do actually. I license with a company called Skin It that does that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've worked with them before.
Yeah, so you'll see here, I'll pull out, and this piece is still very much a work in progress. So this piece, you can see the overlay here of the tarot on it. Hopefully you can see that. And then here's the 8 by 10 as well. Here, let me turn this line art. So it's kind of darkened up, but so you see, so the 10 by 10 square piece has got these sort of extra butterflies going on here that fills the piece out nicely. But then when I crop it to an 8 by 10, you still get some of those butterflies. They're still arranged in a pleasing arrangement on the canvas for the print. And that's one thing, is that do not be afraid to crop. That's a big thing that I've seen with a lot of different artists, is that they'll take this piece that they've done, and in order to fit it down into a size for, say, a journal or a coffee mug or something, they'll shrink it too much, and so then you really can't see the image. And I got to tell you, it's okay to crop it out, even parts of the piece that you're sort of in love with. See if you can take that element and work it in somewhere else, like if you're designing for a coffee mug. But don't be afraid to crop it, because it's actually interesting, and people will be intrigued by what's missing if they can't see the full picture, but it'll look better on the product. You always want to think in terms of how does the image complement the product? How does it look the best? Because otherwise, because you're selling a product at that point, you're not just selling the image. And the great thing about licensing, especially right now, is that independent, here, I'll just zoom in on this for curiosity's sake. This is so not finished, by the way. But the great thing about licensing and products is that it's difficult to sell art, and it's great that we have this indie creative movement where people can sell directly to their fan base now, and that's awesome. But it's difficult to sell art because once somebody's seen up your pretty picture, they've consumed it. It's not like a book where they might read a blurb or they might read the first chapter and then they need to buy the book or go get it from the library in order to read it. And it's not like a t-shirt where they have to buy the t-shirt in order to wear it on their body. Once you've seen the art, you've seen it. And of course, right-click save, people will save it to their desktop, and that's fine. But so how do you get from somebody liking it to liking it enough to want to buy it? And especially with people working on tight budgets, licensing your art, putting it on a t-shirt or a coffee mug or a calendar or any of those things, that's an easier buy for somebody because then they're getting your pretty art, but they're also getting something that they can drink their coffee out of every morning or something they can put on their body. And t-shirts especially, hey, that's free advertising everywhere you go. So, so moving on from that, I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'm trying to...
Well, right now, so we're wondering, how did you actually get to the point where you were able to license your work? Was that a hard process?
Yeah, in the beginning, I would just kind of contact companies myself. Obviously, you know, the internet helped a lot. I mean, really, it made it possible. Before that, you know, I didn't start licensing until probably 2003, because really, before that, you might see a product in a store or something, but you weren't sure how you were going to get in touch with the manufacturer, you know. But then with the internet, you could, you know, you see something you like in a store somewhere, see something that maybe has art that seems comparable to your own and looks like maybe these people might be interested in licensing, look them up online and contact them. And I did that on my own for a while, and then eventually I got an agent who I love. He represents quite a lot of fantasy artists, actually. It's TateLicensing.com. So he represents Ruth Thompson, Ed Beard, myself, a bunch of other people that I'm sure I'm forgetting. But and so he will go to shows and he will kind of try to marry us with companies that we're compatible with. But one thing I will say, I think if you're going to pursue licensing, because even though it allows me the freedom to, for the most part, paint what I want, it's still a business, and you can't be precious about it, and you have to be smart and give them what they need. And so that means working in series always. If you're going to do, it's like with my Celtic knotwork, I started, you know, with 4 paintings, and then I did 4 more. And they always want 4s, and you want those to complement each other. So if you can't think of 4 designs, think in terms of like the seasons or the elements. Do, you know, spring, summer, winter, fall, and I mean vaguely, but let them inspire you. I did one series of 4 that was inspired by colors, CMYK. So it was cyan, magenta, yellow, and black were the figures. So working in terms of 4 like that, they want to see versatility. I think the other reason I've had some success in licensing is that I have different styles, and I'm comfortable working in those different styles, and I turn around really fast, and that is a huge part of the reason I can produce so fast is because of Corel Painter. So I'm not above like going into, actually here's a great example. Let me open this one. You guys are just staring at blank page there. Same point B. Okay, so here's a really good example. Is this picture called, sorry for my computer being slow, called Black Honey, which is a fairy that I painted in Corel Painter a while ago. And you see I kind of married traditional elements here. I started with just some sketches on a piece of paper, which was this little bee here. This was graphite that I scanned into the computer and then added to the design. So it started with this little steampunk bee, which and actually, like, the anatomy on this bee is horrible, so don't look too hard. um, so we did this little steampunk bee, and then I worked from a photo of a friend of mine, Lindsay. She was dressed up, and I've actually painted Lindsay a few times. Um, and so then I painted her in as this kind of queen of the bees or something. And so she's got this necklace here. And then you'll see down on the bottom here, I fleshed out and painted that bee, the sketch of the bee, as, you know, fully rendered piece here with its beautiful wings and stuff. So this bee, then the bee itself became so popular that I then pulled it out of the painting of her, and I didn't repaint it. I just touched it up and pulled it out of the full portrait and made it its own print. And this piece right here, we call it Steam Bee, is one of my most licensed paintings, like, ever. I mean, it's been on everything. It's been shirts and coffee mugs and device skins and stickers and everything you can think of. And so that was just pulled, so I didn't have to repaint that. It was just pulled out of this painting. So then, from there, most recently, it became a bookend by a company named Unicorn Studio. And I'll show you some things here. So they sent me, when you're working with a licensor, you definitely want to work with somebody who is going to go back and forth with you on the sculptures. So they had sent me, the reason this looks like part digital and part photograph is because they had sent me the sculptures of the bookends, and that was, they had sort of these poppies on it that looked really modern and strange and didn't fit with my aesthetic, my design, and which I did not think would sell this piece well. Because sometimes you have to understand, with you might be closer to the target audience and than your manufacturer is, and I think they weren't as familiar with the steampunk aesthetic as much, and so the poppies were sort of like this Art Deco, modern looking in a sense, and they really didn't go with it at all. And so they sent me the pictures, and I said, no, I don't like this at all. And they said, well, that's fine, but we need you to fix it and get it back to us today. Because they were doing a big show, so they didn't have time. But thankfully, working digitally, it wasn't such a big deal. And I actually went to Wikimedia Commons and found a really old piece of acanthus leaf illustration that you see right here. And I basically took that very quickly and then collaged it together in Painter, cutting out pieces, arranging it, transforming it as I wanted and painting over it, and then giving it the colors of the clay that they had sculpted in. And so that's all the acanthus you see up here. And then I changed, this is the bottom of the bookend, and I changed that and added the keyhole and more kind of scroll work and stuff, because again, they had something else here. I can't remember what it was, but it didn't seem fitting to me. So because of working digitally, I was able to get that back to them right away. And so then the finished product, hopefully you guys can see this.
That is very cool.
Isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So they did a great job with us just working together to get that done. But if I'd had to do all that, I don't know, it was much, much faster in the computer, definitely. And of course, I didn't have to scan anything in to send it off. So there's that. And all that came from that original painting, which was completely, at this point looks completely unrelated. And another example of that was more recently, let me go through here. No, don't say it. Okay. More recently, a manufacturer where I've worked with a lot, who's just incredible, wanted me to create a specific piece for them because they'd looked at other sellers of figurines in the market, and they wanted a fantasy sort of fairy couple, romantic on a bridge. They sell a ton of these as cake toppers and things like that. And so I started out with a concept sketch in Corel, and you can see here I've got my 8x10 crop live, and I've also got the sort of tarot card crop live because I was already thinking ahead. What else might I use this for? So this was the really rough sketch. And here you see I flipped it, which is something I do a lot because it's really going to help give you see the piece fresh and get perspective on it. And this is a little bit more refined. And then finally, I went to very clean line art design. And this was the bridge is missing from this because for some reason this was the only save I had of this clean line art, which is horrifying to me. That was definitely an error on my part because this is going in a coloring book for sure, and I'm going to have to finish it. Put the bridge back. But so you can see these really clean lines I've got here. And actually, while we're at it, that's something to talk about. One thing, again, like marrying traditional and digital, if you've got a Cintiq and where you're drawing right on the screen, right where you can see, I tell people this all the time. If you've got traditional tools, like you've got your French curves and your rulers and your plastic sort of shape templates that you use when you're doing graphite drawing on paper, you can slap those right on your Cintiq, okay? And in fact, I got one right here. You can slap it right on the screen of your Cintiq, and use it to draw. Wow, I just draw a nearly perfect circle. So I do that all the time because I'm lazy and impatient, and I don't want to have to use ruler or shape tools. I just want to hold something up to my screen and draw a straight line or the circle or whatever I want. So that was super fast. And then another thing that people, I think with Corel, the tools are so vast and so infinitely adjustable that some folks can find it overwhelming. And you shouldn't be afraid to get in there with your brush controls, open the brush control panel, and just play around. And one thing in particular with line art is you want to go down to, so it's Window, brush control panels. I just hit General because I always have everything open. But you're going to find it in Smoothing. And right here you're going to see the damping setting, which is going to smooth your lines as you're drawing line art, especially for coloring books or anything that's very graphic that you want to be crisp. So if I turn damping way down and I start drawing and see how, I'm purposefully shaking my hand here, but you can see how the line is picking up every little shake. So if I turn damping up, it's already smoother. If I turn it down again, hopefully you can see the difference on this screen. And this pen, this is the, should be the scratch board, I think. We hover.
Yep, it's the scratch board.
Yeah.
I can see it. That is one of the favorite tools of every artist, I think.
For line art, absolutely. Yeah. So it's great. But again, that's the thing with digital. I think one thing that people misunderstand is that, sometimes I think they think there's tricks or there's like make a pretty picture tool. You know what I mean? And really, while there are filters and tools that you can use like that, for the most part, it's still you, the artist. It's still up to you. And so you're training from, when I've had people ask me, oh, how do I get into digital art? I'm like, well, how far did you get into traditional art? Did you take classes? Did you learn to draw from, from the fingers, from the wrist, from the elbow, and from the shoulder? I still do that when I'm drawing now. So if I need like a really sweeping, smooth line, I'm not going to draw that from my fingertips. That's not smooth enough. I'm going to draw from my elbow, and I get a much smoother line. Oops, I did that on the regular canvas. Undo. Favorite thing about digital painting, undo. I've literally been drawing on paper with graphite and made a mistake and moved my hand to the upper left of the paper as if I could undo it, which is a little silly. Okay, so that's the scratch board tool, so damping, we went over that. Oh, that's right. Okay, so we were talking about this piece, the color study. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Okay, so this piece, we had this really tight line art here, and then sketches, paintings. So then I went in and started painting the piece in Corel Painter. And so here I started painting it, and you can see some of the line art still visible over here in his armor, but then you can see how I fully painted the piece and fleshed it out, you know, more 3D. And this was still in the work in progress stage. That's why some of the line art is still visible on it. And that bridge was particularly irritating to paint, I have to say. Wasn't too keen on that.
What are your favorite tools for when you go to do this full painting work?
Um, I love the oil pastels. Here's the fully finished piece. The fully finished painting. And you can see I turned the saturation down. I tend to paint really highly saturated, and then I go back and worry about it later and turn the saturation down. So, but the oil pastels are my absolute favorite. So how I painted, say, this piece is once I've got my line art like this, you can select it, just the line art in Corel Painter, and color it if you want. So I can show you how to do that really quick. So I selected the entire layer and lifted it up from the canvas because we want it to be separate. And granted, one thing you could do is you could just set your line art to multiply if you wanted to. Let me show you. So say we wanted to paint. You can do this by just turning this top layer to multiply if you wanted to. But there's another way. We can go to select, there we go, select auto select image luminance. Okay. Just wasn't seeing it. That's the only thing, my hand was covering where it was. Okay, so now you see it's selected the line art. Now you can do this with sort of a shaded picture too. If you had a graphite drawing that you brought into Corel via scan and you wanted to select just the line art of that, it works very well. But you probably will need to go up and adjust the contrast, and you want it kind of as high contrast as possible. Otherwise, it'll pick up the grain of the paper too. But there's a way to do it, and I have a tutorial on my YouTube about it. So see that now that it's selected, we can create a new layer, and I'm going to take the flat color brush and pick some colors. And say if I wanted to have line art that complemented the colorways of the various areas that I was going to paint, I could do that. So here's his hair, and I'll just kind of fill in some other areas. So you can see. So you can see I just colored the line art. Pretty cool. But I use that a lot. So how I generally work is if I have the line art on one layer, and then I'll create a background layer color, which this is a little too pinky for me. And then I'll start working with, what do we got, the oil pastels, because they feel so real, I have to say. They just feel creamy while you're working with them. So, and let's see. So this is where I'll start usually, is just blocking in my color. And then once I've blocked in some color, for instance. And this is just super rough, it doesn't matter. Then one great thing about the oil pastels is there's a couple ways you can blend with them. And one thing you can do is simply just turn the resaturation all the way down and then go back in, and you're instantly blending those colors that you just laid down. And so I work like this a lot, just with the resaturation turned to wherever I want it to be. Now, in the finished piece, you won't see the strong line art anymore. That quality is gone because at some point in the painting process, I merge the line art down and integrate it into the painting. But there's a rough idea already. Another tool I use a lot, and I did a Facebook Live post about this where we talked about it, is glow. Again, because I'm lazy. Because glow is basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tanya, but to me it seems like it's burn and dodge kind of at the same time. And I use it a lot.
Yep, I believe you're right on that. And this is another one of those tools that every artist loves.
Yeah, because it's such a time saver. Now, technically, her skin tone is a little too light, I think, for this to, which we can fix. Duplicate, multiply, select them both, collapse. Awesome. And now, when I use glow, it'll show up a bit more. And so it's just, it's funny. I have a teenage daughter, and she's very into makeup right now. And makeup these days, I don't know if anybody's ever watched YouTube makeup tutorials, but it's very painterly. They're into contouring and highlight, and that's painting. So I'll go in with glow and kind of add these highlights wherever I want, and then I'll just blend them out. And yes, you could apply that by just picking a color. I mean, there's but it's just everybody finds the tools that work the way that they want to work. So I'll apply that in. Let's see. Another way to blend that I blend, which is I've done a lot, which is kind of fun, is I actually use the cloning tools to blend. And so let me see. So in order to do that, you'd want to save the document that you're currently in. Which we need to save it as an actual something that makes sense. Okay. And then you're going to want to open it. So in your clone source palette, so that you're using that. And then you can use any brush you want and turn on the cloners, and it'll just pick up the color from where you're currently painting. Okay, so for instance, let's choose something. Let's just pick an acrylic brush. Choose a dry bristle brush. And go into our color palette and turn on the stamp tool, and that means we're cloning. And it's at 100%, so it's very strong right now, so I can turn it down to, 2% is not going to work, Brigid. And let me zoom in so you can see this better. And so I'm using the acrylic brush now. And it's as if you had your thumb on the color picker of an eyedropper tool, and you were constantly tapping as you were painting, except you don't have to bother doing that and hurt your thumb.
Very interesting technique. I don't see a lot of illustrators use cloning in this way.
So here I'm going to just show you again really quick. So I'm laying down this color in her hair here.
Are you using your Cintiq right now, or a different tablet?
Yeah, Cintiq.
Okay.
So here, I'll lay down some more color, and just show you again. Okay, now this is where it does get tricky because it changed. And so what I have found that is with the way the clone source works now, sometimes I need to save again if I've laid down a whole bunch of color. I might have to save the document again, and I might even have to open it again on my clone source palette. So I tend to work in stages because of that, just so that I'm getting the best, the best effect. And that didn't used to be the case. It used to just all be like instantly live, and I love that, but we got to work with what's there. So let's see, we went over cloning. I've got a list of stuff here. Oh, one thing, and this you guys added a while ago, but people still don't know about it. People moving from Photoshop to Corel Painter, the first complaint I hear a lot is, where's that hard edge brush? Well, it's called flat color, and it's in the pens. There's flat color, and there's flat color 2, and there you go. There's that lovely hard edge brush you were missing from Photoshop. So it exists. Let's see. Let's open a... Oh, I never finished showing you guys the final product. Okay, so we were working on that Eternal Love piece, and there it is.
Oh.
That's the final... That's a really bad photograph. But they go... There's the final sculpture. There's the sculpture of it.
That is so neat.
Yeah. And so that's one thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I don't want to stop you. I know you had other stuff to show. How do they map your painting to the sculpture then?
They have really talented sculptors that literally sit there and just do it. I give them the original drawing. In this case, and actually they just got like the tight line art with a colorway underneath it. That's all they had from one angle. And then just some verbal instructions from me as to what to do. And then what they did is they'll send me, this is like, so for instance, they'll send me pictures, and I'll send them corrections, okay? And the factory is in China. So even though our representative that works with them speaks Chinese, there's still a language barrier, so I try to just be as universal as I can be. So you'll see here on the left of this image, this is what they originally sent me, where her wings, her look like a butterfly. They meet in the middle of her back, and her hair is, where is it? Is it going on either side? It's like the wings are going in through the hair or something, and I didn't really like how that looked. So I X'd it out and put a frowny face. And then I used, in Corel Painter, I copied some of the other pieces of hair and painted what I wanted, what it should look like. So I painted the hair between the wings, and then I just did a check mark and a happy face and an arrow. And that's kind of the universal language. So yeah, there were a couple of pieces like that. And they're just really, really talented there. They do an amazing job. But it's funny, the disconnect sometimes. We had a piece a few years ago that had blueberries in it. And I don't know if blueberries aren't available in China. Maybe they aren't. But so they weren't quite sure how a blueberry should look from the drawing, and they weren't quite getting it. So we had to send them all these photographs of blueberries so that they would get how the anatomy of a blueberry on the top. All right, let's see. So another thing that I use all the time in Painter is the mirroring and kaleidoscope tools. So, and I don't think that these are used enough. They are absolutely instrumental in designing of my Celtic knot work. I'll use kaleidoscope for that frequently. It's once you turn on the mirroring tools over here on the left on your tool toolbar, you got mirroring, kaleidoscope, and you can choose how many segments. Now, the only thing I would say, and maybe I'm wrong, but so far it looks like kaleidoscope only mirrors. So if I was going to draw a knotwork, I'd probably take the scratch board tool, come in here, and just start playing around. This is also great for designing coloring books. So I have 2 coloring books that are just nothing but mandalas, or mandala, however you want to say it, that I basically created in this program. Oh wait, I want to, there we go, 9. Use that color. And I would just work in Painter, just doodling. It's incredibly cathartic, therapeutic.
Wow.
And you just,
You make
yeah.
this look so much. When I get in there and I mess with this, mine never look as good. So
You know,
is it this easy for you where you can just generate them instantly? Or do you play around a lot?
oh, I play around a lot. I'll do a whole, several and then throw it away, because I just don't like it. And I feel like I think the grass is always greener because I feel like I'm always using the same shapes, and I'll look at other people's, mandalas, and I'm like, oh, they're so good. Those are such interesting shapes. I don't have to challenge myself. I've literally gone through the alphabet where I'll like create a mandala where I'm starting with like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, just to challenge myself as I'm creating because I tend to be very round with my shapes and attracted to curly cues and stuff all the time. And actually, if you just need to meditate, this is so fun.
It really is. I agree.
Or just, and you don't, like I was using flat color, that's for, um, I use the flat color brush because it's got the sharp edge if I'm creating for, say, a coloring book, because what I'm trying to create is these spaces, right, for people to color in and create their own thing. And when I'm done with it, I also take it, I save it as a ping file, and then I run it through Adobe Illustrator to get really, really crisp lines. But you don't have to create that way. You could also work with the watercolors, and I do that all the time to create a mandala that's already colored. Um, say to put on a product and sell. So, for instance, and mandalas are just so popular right now, and I see them on Society 6 all the time for sale as giant wall hangings and things. So, and this is the digital watercolor. You can use the other watercolors, which will really react the way watercolor reacts in real life. So kaleidoscope and mirror, and oh, let me go back to mirror because absolutely don't know where I would be without this when it comes to designing for, say, costumes or background patterns. But also, if you're painting a figure that has, say, elaborate, pattern on their garment, you can come in here and, oops, need to open it, and start creating maybe a damask pattern. Um, and the mirroring just lets you do that so easily, so quickly. So you've already got so much of your this pattern here, then you could keep working on this and turn it into a damask pattern and then apply it to a dress on a figure you're creating. I love that. And the same thing with, let me turn this layer off. Oh wow, that's like the same color as my background. Okay. So a friend wanted me to show the depth lofter because that's one. You'll find that in Impastos. And the depth lofter is really awesome for, I think, creating like an embossed metal look. So let's see. 100% opacity, smaller. Okay. So I'll work like this sometimes with depth lofter, and we'll create this embossed metal pattern. The more you go over an area, the more raised it's going to be. But there's one catch when working with this to create embossed metal. If you then wanted to go back in and work with it and smooth it, so for instance, I grab my oil pastel because I think, well, I like how this looks, but I want it to be a little more painterly, so I'm going to grab my oil pastel and come in here. And what should be happening is that the impasto should no longer, there we go, shouldn't be live anymore, okay? So when you're working with that tool, it's kind of one of those live layers. So when you're drawing with it with the impasto, if you went and you erased some of it, it would still be creating that effect, kind of like when the watercolor layers are live and they're still wet and they're still kind of active. And I don't understand the technicalities of it, but it's live. You'll be able to then work with what you created and make it more painterly. So for instance, here I'm looking at my design, but I'm refining the shape of it. Okay, right. So basically we freehanded a design and embossed it at the same time using mirror and the depth lofter. We, freehanded this lovely design. And then we're just gonna go back, and this is where our decisions as an artist are gonna come into play. But it's great because now you can, and see now I'm getting into it. But you can go through and refine this now, and
wow, that looks that looks amazing.
Doesn't it? And it did sort of all this work for you. It did all these shortcuts. No, you go to art school or you take your classes or you read your books or whatever you need to do, okay, to learn, because you've got to get the foundation there. It's just like in school when you did your multiplication tables, right? They made you memorize them all. And then you got to more advanced math class and they hand you a calculator, right? Because you had to lay the foundation work. So if you've got the foundation work of how to paint metal and you've learned what you need to learn about it, well, then you can use these tools to just take these shortcuts that are just going to help you work faster. So for instance, okay, we've got this lovely metal here we did, and now a favorite thing I'll do is go back into our beloved glow tool, and the glow tool gets real light real fast, so I tend to turn the opacity on it way down, and I also tend to work it darker and the darker colors. But the glow tool works with the color palette. So if you're coming over here with glow and you get this color, that's because we're in the blues. If we move over into the pinks, we're going to get the pinks now. So, and it also mimics the saturation. So if I turn the saturation down, okay, now it looks just kind of like Dodge, because I turned the saturation down and it's just more like a gray. So I'll take this, the glow tool, and I'll go back in on this metal we created, and I'll do like some, and I'll do like, say, a highlight down here, anywhere. It's kind of fantasy metal. It's getting light from a lot of different directions here, and if you're working with silver, of course, you can throw a couple different colors in there because it's kind of reflected light, whatever's around it, of course, and you can use it lightly where the shadow is here to kind of give some color to that shadow.
I have a question from Sherry. She's wondering, what is your go-to paper?
Oh, that's a great question. Basic paper.
Keep it simple.
The default. I know. There's Corel Painter is so amazing, and that there is just like vast unexplored territory. It's like Star Trek that way. It's like all these things. And honestly, paper is one area that I should probably explore more, and it's just kind of been missing from my workflow. Um, so yeah, so this is, and then of course, again, I'll go back in and paint that out with my oil pastels to make it more painterly. Now, one thing you have to be careful of with glow is that if you're working on a layer that has transparency in it, you might want to lock the transparency. Otherwise, you're going to get these sort of dark shadow areas into your transparency that you weren't counting on. So just be aware of that. Let's see, flat color. Looking at my list here of things. Oh, okay, here's another really quick. This is another little hidden thing that not everybody realizes. Okay, so say you're working with the oil pastels and you're painting with them. Okay, there's certain brushes where you're working with them there, where you'll get this sort of white ghosting. You can see here. This is easily fixed, guys. It's in your brush controls. Go to Window, Brush Controls, Blending, and check this little box here, Enhanced Layer Blending. And then you won't have this white that's going on.
Yeah, that was a new enhancement in this version of the product. So prior to that, you probably will have the problem unless you're using 2016.
Right. Well, why haven't you upgraded, right? What are you waiting for? So yeah, so enhanced layer blending is just absolutely brilliant. I love that. And then last night, yeah, we were trying to figure out for her, she had some very specific things that she wanted to do. And she was looking for a brush that worked just like the smudge brush in Photoshop. And that's something I take as a personal challenge. Like, whatever it is that you're addicted to in Photoshop, let's figure out how to do it in Painter, because you don't need to float back and forth. You'll be happier for it. I mean, if you do need to, that's fine. But so she wanted a brush that worked just like that. And one thing that I thought was interesting is I went into the blender brushes for her and found the soft, I think it was the soft blender stump. And what she wanted was, let me lay down some color here. She wanted a brush that would kind of work push-pull, but also smudging at the same time. So I'm laying down some color so that we can mess with this. So in blenders, and actually I'm in the Painter 2015 brushes, even though I'm using 2016 right now. So in the blender brushes, soft blender stump. And one thing that can be tricky, especially if you don't understand all the engineering geek speak about what goes on with your brushes and how each brush is engineered and how it works, you might not understand which setting is going to do what. And sometimes it seems like different settings do the same things on different brushes, okay? So what you have to do is just get in there and don't be scared and play. So opacity, of course, we're always thinking, oh, the opacity is like the strength or the darkness, okay? Except that with some brushes, you're actually going to have better luck in the grain or even in the bleed. And in this particular brush, what I found is when I had the bleed, I think it was this one. Yeah. Okay, so when I had the bleed all the way down, I felt like I was getting more of a push-pull, okay? I'm dragging this pink into the blue, and I can drag the blue into the pink. And when I turn the bleed all the way up to 100, it's softer because it's bleeding more. And so I'm getting more of a smear. or smudge or whatever the language you want to use. And we're able to go right across here and just completely blend this color together. So this was the best substitute I could find for the way that the smudge brush works in Photoshop. But remember, it's all in the bleed. Sorry, my screen is doing wonkiness.
It looks okay from here.
Oh, okay. I also have tutorials on my YouTube for making your own brushes, and those two tutorials are making specific brushes, but the process is the same for making any brush, and it's just about how brave are you to go in there and check the settings and play with things. And so, for instance, but one brush I made in a tutorial there was a liquefy brush, because that was, again, something that I would use in Photoshop would be the liquefy tool, especially when I'm painting portraits, because frequently somebody's the features of a particular person, if you're painting them, sometimes they'll travel. As you're painting, they'll start looking less like your original sketch. I mean, there's nothing like that first sketch, right? So I would use liquefy to tweak people's features back into place. And then it's a filter, so I was like working in a separate window, and then it would, you make your changes there, and then you would go back to the Photoshop window, and it was a little awkward, and I wanted something with more control and that was more direct. So I made a liquefy brush for Painter, and that's a tutorial on my YouTube. And you can literally, let's find something that where we can tweak a face.
I just want to let you know that I'm completely appreciating the amount of time you're spending, where it's 2:13, and whatever you want to show, I'm fine with that. I just wanted to let you know that you're not obligated to keep presenting.
Well, I'll probably wrap up in a few minutes.
Okay.
He brought me lunch, so.
Oh, nice.
So here's a piece I've been working on for way too long, and in fact, this started out as concept art for the figurine manufacturer. So this started out as concept art that I did in Painter, and you can see this is all, at this point, my figurine manufacturer, we know each other well enough that I can just give them this line art and the colorway. There's the skirt design, which I used the mirror tool to create that, and that's on the bottom of her skirt. And I did all the line art, colorway, told them, the details that they needed, like metallics. And this was a series of 4 figurines that we did. And here's the completed figurine. It's kind of a low-res photo, sorry. So you can see they took that and made the figurine. And these are selling really, really well for us, this set of 4. And then there's supposed to be paintings, and I had intended to have the paintings done before the figurines came out, but that didn't happen. So this is still a work in progress, this piece. And, the painting can look different from the concept art, of course, but it's still the same idea. But here's a perfect example of if I wanted to use liquefy to tweak her expression. So this is the tool I made. And you can see it. It's the tutorials on YouTube. So suddenly she's worried. I wanted to tweak the shape of her nose. We could. Oh, I should have saved it as another layer, but we could make her smile. Change the shape of her chin. Make it a little longer, and of course you're still going to have to go back in and do some cleanup work to paint it. But
I love that brush, though.
Yeah, it's great, and
yeah,
and it's fantastic. And it's the same. I have two make your own brushes tutorial, and really they're kind of doing the same thing with each of them, but they start with a different brush. So the liquefy starts with flat color, and then I made like a smear smudge brush. What's this? Yeah, that I do the same thing. You're using the same liquefy plugin when you're creating it, but it started with a blender, and so it's much softer. And that brush, and again, this is kind of not maybe the best because she's already got eyelashes, but I use that one a lot
You
for
make
eyelash.
such realistic eyes, and it's amazing. Wow. Okay, I've tried to do eyelashes, and I can't ever make it look like that.
Eyelashes are a big part of it is the angle working from the wrist and the angle of the paper. Or like I'll literally like turn my Cintiq, rotate it in order to do them. And usually I'll even flip the canvas because I prefer doing eyelashes from the right.
Hmm.
So, and when I was work on traditional paper, I'll literally like turn it upside down if I need to get the right angle. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to leave her eyelashes like this, but this because she already had them. But how I usually start with that when I'm doing eyelashes, and honestly, I'll use like kind of a purpley magenta a lot for eyelashes. And by the time I'm done with it, you're not really recognizing that that's the color, but I feel like kind of so I'll just like lay down color. This is an extreme example, but I'll lay down color and then take my smear smudge brush and pick out my lashes like this. And you got to remember that they kind of overlap each other. They're not perfect. They get a little messy. But I'm very subtractive when I work too. So say, okay, I've got too much here. That's okay. I go in and erase. So then I'll go in and erase what I have here, what I don't need. So that you end up.
Photo artists would kill for this brush.
Yeah. So there we painted some random set of lower eyelashes on Glastonbury tour. Nice. Okay. But anyway, that. Okay, and I think we'll just wrap it up here.